The devil is in the details, they always say, and that's really what we've got left on the Tansu project, little details. Welcome back to the Renaissance Woodworker. This is episode number 40. We're going to finish off our Tansu Memorial Box. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Thanks for coming back again this week. Got a lot of emails, a lot of response to my last Tansu post, and I'm glad to hear that this is a new form for a lot of people, and hopefully you're getting a lot out of it. Acquired quite a few new listeners last week on this topic, and actually acquired them on this topic and not the original post I did several episodes on Tansu. So welcome to the new listeners. I hope you enjoy it. This week, really, it's just finishing up the little details. When we last left off, I had built the carcass, and I had built the drawers, and I was going to be carving little finger pulls for the tops of the drawers. So let's head on down to the shop, and that's where we'll pick up this build.
Back to the bench we go, and these are the top panels for the drawers. They're made out of cypress. Got it pinched on the bench there with a Wonder Dog and a bench dog, and just using a number 1 sweep or a straight chisel, I'm going to go ahead and define the straight edge of that thumb pull, and really just using a stab cut here, just a little bit of hand pressure to get down to the depth I'm looking for. And the depth was really only about 1/4 of an inch thick. The panel itself, it was only about 1/8 of an inch deep, because the panel itself is 1/4 inch thick. And using a number 7 sweep, I'm going to go ahead and define the back curve of the thumb pull. I'll just use 3 stab cuts to connect all the lines. If you hear the quacking in the background, that's actually my cell phone. So short little edit out the cell phone ring. Come back with the 3rd stab cut to define that outer edge. And then from here, it's just simply light shallow cuts to hollow that out. And working with a nice sharp chisel, you can really get a smooth cut across the grain like I'm doing here. And going with the grain, a lot of times you can get some unexpected tear out, so you usually try to work across the grain as much as possible with carving chisels. And I've got it pretty much defined here. I just want to go back and kind of curve around those edges and connect those lines so that you can't see the stab cuts I initially started with. So really that is my depth indicator. Once I don't see those stab cuts anymore, I know I'm at the depth I'm looking for. Clear the waste out of the way, and go back with a straight chisel, and just make sure I've separated any fibers down at the very bottom of that recess and cleared those out of the way. And then just for good measure, I wanted to leave as much of the carved look as possible, but did go back with a little bit of a 220 grit sandpaper and just kind of evened it out a little bit, just to give it a more uniform look. And here is the panel in action, so I can put it all the way in so that it seats, and then very easily pulls back out with the thumb pull. So now I wanted to put the Miller dowels into the joints to reinforce the rabbet joints. Set up 2 stop blocks on my drill press, and with the Miller dowel drill bit, I drill them out. Now we'll go.
Okay, so now it's time to reinforce the joints on the drawer, and I'm using Miller dowels. These are the Mini X size, and I've got them in walnut, and I love these little things. In case you don't know, they're basically just a stepped dowel. It's got actually 3 different diameters, and the center has some ridges to allow for glue. You buy a specific stepped drill bit, and these mini sizes are actually good for up to about 3/4 of an inch thick wood. The cap size is 1/4 of an inch, so I find it works really well for small applications like a box like this with 3/8 inch sides. So I went ahead and drilled out all the holes on the drill press, and just set up a simple stop block and a fence, actually 2 stop blocks that I could slide back and forth and register the hole here, and then since the box is I'm doing it on both sides, just flip it around and use those same stop blocks to register it. So I've got a total of 8 holes per drawer, and installation is nice and simple. Essentially, these ridges on the dowel is what holds the glue. So you just put a little bit of glue on those ridges, stick it in the hole, and hammer it home. I like to use a metal hammer just because you can really hear the pitch change. And you can see I put way too much glue on that last dowel there because I got a lot of squeeze out. I'm trying to get a little bit of squeeze out on the end grain here. I'll be able to clean all that up in a little bit when I flush trim them all. But I just find this gives me a really nice accent to the drawers. When you do pull the drawers out of the carcass, you get kind of a little surprise, and the walnut, you know, adds a contrasting color to this honey-colored cypress. So that's what I'm going to do to reinforce all these joints. It'll certainly add a lot of strength to the joint, but it's also a nice decorative touch as well.
So now it's time to fit the drawers to the carcass, and I obviously want to plane those miller dowels flush. So I'm using my jack plane here, and pretty much I've already determined that the height of the drawers is just about right, so I'm going to focus mostly on the sides. And you see me working with my jack plane there, and a little bit tough to work across there, but I'm still a little bit wide. So now notice how the box tips forward just a little bit, so I tighten up the Wonder Dog to get it even tighter. I'm still kind of pushing kind of hard to get that jack plane across there. Then I take it out to fit it again, and I realize that I've actually marked up the front of the drawer front. That Palomino is particularly soft, so I went over, pulled out one of those muzzles for the bench dogs, this kind of rubbery face, just so I could protect it a little bit more. And this way I was able to tighten up the Wonder Dog just a little bit more without damaging the face, but also keeping it nice and steady so that I'm able to have a nice steady surface to plane on. So the box is not rocking, but you know, I'm still pushing maybe just a little bit too hard there. So I'll get to that in a little bit. So now we'll try the test fit, and I've got a nice smooth fit there. I want it to be snug when I go in there, so I do have to plane a little bit off the top there. But now let's go back to this. I apply wax to the sole of the plane, and I'm working on the second drawer. Watch this. It makes a big difference to put a little bit of wax on the sole. I fitted the entire first drawer without waxing the sole and just ended up having a whole lot of problems. So this is a real-time clip here. I didn't do any editing here. So you saw what I did with the plane there, and it fits. It took me about half the time to fit that second drawer just because I waxed the sole, and I was able to take more complete full-length shavings. So now I'm just going to go back with my block plane, and I just want to break the edges just the tiniest bit. This also controls what the front reveal looks like on the drawers, but I'll need to kind of get back to that in a little bit to make sure they're even. But that's really it. You know, just cleaning up the sides so they're not sharp and they won't hurt the hands when you pull the drawer out. So now let's take a look at it. Both drawers are fitted. Again, you can see the details on the joints there with the Miller dowels. I think it adds a really nice effect when you get the cypress on the sides, the Curie on the front, and the contrasting walnut dowels. I think it makes a very nice look. There's the fitted panels on the top. So now let's talk about refining the reveal on the very front.
Okay, I've gone ahead and just using some planes, cleaned up the box all the way around. And I had just a section here where the drawers were not quite even. You know, a little bit more was sticking out here, so really just took a few passes along the front here with the block plane to flush it up. Now, the issue I'm dealing with, and it's pretty minor, but I want to try to get an even reveal all the way around the drawers. And you can see got a little bit more reveal here than I do here. So I will take a few passes with the block plane and make one all the way across. And that gets it nice and even. So then I want to get this reveal even with this reveal. Here I need to make passes pretty much all the way across. So let's put a little chamfer here on the end so we don't blow out the grain there. Let's test that. I've got to keep track of the top and the bottom here. Nice. Well, that worked out well. Nice even reveal all the way across. Now obviously this is the top, this is the bottom, and just gravity is going to tighten up the reveal here. It's going to be a little bit harder to control, but I do have some unevenness. So the best way to control this, because obviously if I just plane across the front, I'm going to you know, the box is just going to sit down on top of it. So I'm going to create a small chamfer here along the bottom to try to get an even reveal. Good. Nice even reveal. And we'll do the same thing here. Okay, so now I need to work on the sides and get them even. This one's pretty good. I need a little bit more here. And I'll do the same thing. Just chamfer it a little bit. Good, that looks good. Now I need quite a bit more here. Alright, that looks really good. It's nice and flush with the front. The drawers are fitted. Now it moves on to carving the detail on the top. What I did, I'm fortunate that my wife works for a pretty nice private school and they have a Japanese program. So what I did was seek out the definition for best friend, and, you know, as in man's best friend, and I came up with the Japanese word for shinyui, and this is the translation. I did get it on Google Translator, but I verified it with the Japanese teachers just to make sure I wasn't carving the wrong thing in. And I want to do kind of a bonsai type graphic, so I just messed around with a couple designs here. I want it to be very, very simple, something I can carve purely with a V tool. And then on the boxes themselves, on top of the lids, I'll be carving in the names of each individual dog, Shania and Trisket. So let's get out the carving tools and get to work.
So you got to see the drawing and the Japanese script that I had come up with in the previous clip. And I actually did a little bit of research on Japanese characters and how they're actually done with traditionally Japanese calligraphy with the paintbrush. And, you know, certainly while I I'm not able to do that myself, I did learn how these characters were drawn. In other words, what order they were done, whether it was done on a downward stroke or an upward stroke. And you can see me actually writing them out in pencil here in the order that they're supposed to be done. I wanted the lines to flow like they're supposed to in the Japanese script. And here I'm just drawing out the bonsai tree. And I took inspiration for this form from just a couple of just actual images of bonsai I found on the web, but drew several freehand myself, and at this point I'd kind of gotten the idea of how I wanted to look and was able to just kind of draw it on the box top after drawing like 10 or 12 of them up to this point. So once I got that drawn in place, that was going to be my guide that I was going to work off of. Carving is it's really not as intimidating or as difficult as you would think it would be. There's certainly a lot of different types of carving, high relief and low relief carving. This is, actually I'm not sure what the actual term is for this, but the carving itself is being recessed below the surface of the box. raising the carving up and recessing the spot around it would be a relief carving, and I have done a little bit of that, one or two instances. That is a lot of fun, but I just don't have, and it's a little bit more difficult to kind of cut in around the image you're trying to raise, and I just don't have the confidence in myself to put it onto this particular box since it is a commission just yet. So what I'm doing here is using a V tool. This is a, I believe it's a 14.4 V tool. I'm just tracing around the edge of the bonsai. And you can see that while I'm not ambidextrous, you need to feel pretty comfortable switching hands here as you turn around these corners and getting the best angle on it. I'm doing very, very shallow cuts at this point, probably 1/32 of an inch deep, and that's kind of the way I want to do it. I just want to separate out the image, so I'm essentially breaking up the fibers, and I'll go in to the interior later and look to deepen the whole carving. So really, using a V-tool is actually a lot of fun because you can really follow your lines very easy on it. It turns on a dime. It's just a matter of taking it slowly and following the lines you've already drawn on. Now I wanted to do the boughs, the actual evergreen part of the bonsai, and I'm grabbing a 9 sweep. This is a very narrow tool, a very tight radius on the sweep, and I'm not sure the actual width of this. Again, it's a very narrow tool as well. I wanted a narrow tool so I got a lot of texture in the actual evergreen parts of the boughs. And really what I'm doing is going around the edge again, breaking up the fibers and outlining it, but then I kind of make smaller concentric circles inside of that to create a nice texture throughout. Now I switch back over to the trunk, and I'm kind of hollowing out the center of the trunk. To differentiate between the trunk and the boughs, I took the trunk quite a bit deeper than the boughs themselves. And with the V-tool, I'm actually just putting in wood grain, really, just some vertical lines that follow the shape of the trunk in order to give it a wood grain look. Now I'm going back with the V-tool around the edge of the boughs, and then also my number 9 sweep, and just defining the edges a little bit more, almost like, you know, taking inks around the edge of a drawing to kind of set off that drawing and make it stick out from the surrounding field of Kiri. So now it's down to the Japanese characters. This was just using the V-tool. I started with the 14.4 V-tool and would everything lightly, again, just to put the initial shape in there and to break up those fibers. You can see I've got to work both with the grain and cross grain. And anytime I'm working with the grain, it's a little bit more white knuckle because I'm trying to control the tear out there. Later I'll switch actually to a slightly wider profile V-gouge and deepen and widen the script lines here so that they stand out a little bit more and almost look painted on with a calligraphy brush. So that really does it for the carving. Let's show you what we came up with. And there it is, bonsai tree and the Japanese characters, which mean best friend. So now it's time to get that to stand out a little bit, and I wanted to dye the surface and then sand it to remove the dye, just leaving it in the pores. So I've got some translucent dye. This is actually cordovan dye. Cordovan's kind of a deep, deep reddish purple. And I wanted to go with a really dark color, almost black, but not quite. So you can see there really was no science in how many drops I put into the water there. I'm just trying to get it dark. And I apply it on just, you know, with a brush. This is actually a synthetic brush I'm using. It doesn't really matter because there's so little I'm putting in here. And it is water-based, so of course it soaks it right up. And you can start to see the carving pop out. But what I found, as soon as I moved my hand there, is that's too light for me. I don't like that, a little too much purple. So I squirt actually quite a bit more dye in there than I wanted to. But I definitely got you know, a deep, dark color at this point, which is really what I was looking for.
Okay, everybody, this is the moment of truth. We've done the carving, dyed the carving, and I applied, let's see, four coats of a semi-gloss lacquer. wanted to go with a nice Japanese finish, and lacquer is pretty common. So as you can see, I put a few pieces of the hardware on already, and it's really quite simple. I got all this hardware from Lee Valley, and at the time you order the tiny little brads that attach all the hardware. And the way I do it is I'll position the hardware where I want it and hold it firmly in place, and just with a scratch awl kind of get the hole started, and this way the nail or the brad will kind of stand up in the hole. And as easy as that, the brad goes in. So you can imagine from here, I've just got a whole lot of hammering to do to get all the hardware in place. Now, if you haven't already listened to my earlier podcast just about Tansu in general, I would say go back and listen to that for some tips on, not so much tips, but just information on Tansu in general, how the form and design started, what they were really used for, and what's the story behind all this hardware. And one of the things that I found most interesting about the Tansu style is the fact that this is a blending of the trades. It's a blending of the metalsmith's work and the carpenter's work. And because Tansu really was a piece of furniture or storage designed for just the common people, it's truly folk art. And as I said, with it embracing multiple trades, a village could essentially produce its own Tansu between the blacksmith and the carpenter. This piece, as I've mentioned, this piece is modeled after a sea chest. The sea chests were always pretty small because obviously they needed to go on ship, but they were also heavily fortified with hardware because they were meant to take quite a beating, and oftentimes they held the ship's payroll. If this were truly going to be an authentic sea chest, I would want to put a lot more hardware on this. The hardware not only kept the contents secure, but it reinforced the joinery. And you'll see the finger joints here. Traditionally, Tansu would probably have a hardware strap there to kind of cover that joint as well. I didn't want to go that far, obviously, because I didn't want to overwhelm it. I just love the kind of the warm honey color of this kiri. So I kept the hardware relatively light. On the front, once the drawers go in place, you'll be able to see, obviously there's quite a bit more hardware there. And I like the fact that I've got less hardware on the other faces to kind of balance it out. So let me continue hammering all this in, and I'll come back once I've got everything in place.
So here we go. Here is the finished product. For a finish, I went ahead and sanded after I applied the dye and removed all of the color on the rest of the box. And I applied 4 coats of just an aerosol lacquer. I like to use a Watco lacquer. You can see the detail on the top there with the Japanese characters. And again, it's not completely black, it's just a little bit off black, and I do like that because the hardware is obviously black enough. You can see the details on the drawers with the Miller dowels. That's a nice effect. And here is the carving of the dogs' names on the drawer tops. And I did the same process to carve those names and dye them that I did with the carving on top. Nice smooth fit on both drawers. Nice smooth fit on the panels on top of the drawers as well. I really am happy with kind of the honey look of the Kiri complementing with the cypress. The lacquer really brings out both of them. Put my maker's mark on the bottom there. And I just love how the hardware makes such a stark contrast. And then of course the darker color of the end grain that highlights that finger joint. Really, really happy with how this build